Good morning, viewer. Welcome to our perspective. Here is a breaking news. Yes, scientists perhaps on the clue to possible origin of COVID-19 as who says all possibilities remain on the table. A new analysis of genetic material collected from January to March 2020 at the Hunan seafood market in Wuhan, China has uncovered animal DNA in samples already known to be positive for SARS-CoV-2. The coronavirus that causes COVID-19, a significant amount of that DNA appears to belong to animals known as raccoon dogs, which were known to be traded at the market, according to officials with the World Health Organization, who addressed the new evidence in a new briefing on last Friday. The connection to raccoon dogs came to light after Chinese researchers shared raw genetic sequences taken from swabbed specimens collected at the market early in the pandemic. The sequences were uploaded in late January 2023 to the data sharing site Jacet but have recently been removed. An international team of researchers noticed them and downloaded them for further study, the WHO official said Friday. The new findings, which have not yet been publicly posted, do not settle the question of how the pandemic started. They do not prove that raccoon dogs were infected with SARS-CoV-2, nor do they prove that raccoon dogs were the animals that first infected people. But because viruses don't survive in the environment outside of their host for long, finding so much of the genetic material from the virus intermingled with genetic material from raccoon dogs is highly suggestive that they could have been carrier. According to scientists who worked on the analysis was led by Christian Anderson, an immunologist and microbiologist at Scripps Research, Edward Holmes, a virologist at the University of Sydney, Michael Orway, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Arizona. These three scientists who have been digging into the origin of the pandemic were interviewed by reporters for the Atlantic magazine. CNN has reached out to Anderson, Holmes and Orway for comment. The details of the international analysis were first reported Thursday by the Atlantic. The new data is emerging as Republicans in Congress have opened investigation into the pandemic's origin. Previous studies provided evidence that the virus likely emerged naturally in the market, but could not point to a specific origin. Some US agencies, including a recent US Department of Energy assessment, say the pandemic likely resulted from a lab leak in Wuhan. What the sample show? In the news briefing on Friday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus assured the organization was the first made aware of the sequences on the Sunday. As soon as we became aware of this data, we contacted the Chinese CDC and urged them to share it with WHO and the international scientific community so it can be analyzed, Tedros said. WHO also convened its scientific advisory group for the origins of the novel pathogen known as SAGO, which has been investigating the roots of the pandemic. To discuss the data on Tuesday, the group heard from Chinese scientists who had originally studied the sequences as well as the group of international scientists taking a fresh look at them. WHO experts said in the Friday briefing that the data are not conclusive. They will still cannot say whether the virus leaked from a lab or if it spilled over naturally from animals to human. These data do not provide a definitive answer to the question of how the pandemic began, but every piece of data is important in moving us closer to the answer, Tedros said. What the sequences to prove, WHO officials said, is that China has more data that might relate to the origins of the pandemic that it has not yet shared with the rest of the world. This data could have and should have been shared 3 years ago, Tedros said. We continue to call on China to be transparent in sharing data and to conduct the necessary investigation and share results. Understanding how the pandemic began remains a moral and scientific imperative. CNN has reached out to the Chinese scientists who first analyzed and shared the data but has not received a reply. The Chinese researchers who were affiliated with the country's Center for Disease Control and Prevention had shared their own analysis of the samples in 2022. In that preprint study posted last year, they concluded that no animal host of SARS-CoV-2 can be deduced. The research looked at 923 environmental samples taken from within the seafood market and 457 samples taken from animals, and found 63 environmental samples that were positive for the virus that caused COVID-19. Most were taken from the western end of the market. None of the animal samples which were taken from refrigerated and frozen products for sale and from live stray animals roaming the market were positive, the Chinese authors wrote in 2022. When they looked at the different species of DNA represented in the environmental sample, the Chinese authors only saw a link to humans but no other animals. When an international team of researchers recently took a fresh look at the genetic material in the samples which were swapped in and around the stalls of the market using an advanced genetic techniques called metagenomics, scientists they were surprised to find a significant amount of DNA belonging to raccoon dogs, a small animal related to foxes. Raccoon dogs can be infected with the virus that caused COVID-19 and have been high on the list of suspected animal host for the virus. BNS report for Sector USA.